But now it is time for action. We must not go quietly into
all those of us who have had to look at young girls, women up to the age of 40 odd, who have unwanted pregnancies and have to cross the water on the run, so to speak. So we are thinking of you at this time. It's just not a sad time alone. It's a major juncture in Irish history. This will go down in the history books. How it is dealt with and how you will capture the middle ground in this moment of unity. Just look at it. This moment of unity. I would not quite like to be in your shoes. You've got a lot to face, and thank you for listening to me. Good luck and good night.
Never again! Never again! Never again! Never again!
Caught up in the constitutional, legal and medical arguments, and we need to make sure that the message is so clear about what we're doing here. We're trying to protect that woman's right to life. On Wednesday, when this news broke about the horrific death of Savita Halappapar and the horrific circumstances in which she died, over 45,000 of you sent emails to your TDs and demanded legislation. And we've been told in the National Women's Council that that's been the single biggest response to any campaign. And today, just before the march began, over 68,000 emails have been sent to every member in the Lord. And Taoiseach, Taoiseach and James Riley, that is the will of the people, and that is what you must listen to and get your heads out of the sand and legislate. As much as all of us here want to, so much want to undo what's happened for Savita and for the women who've gone before her, we can't. But what we can do now is stand together, women and men in Ireland, and make sure that this never ever happens again. We must do it now.
The North of Ireland for abortion is also high. 30 years ago, when we tried to stop it as a woman's life, we warned that women would die if they put it into the Constitution, because it was clear that they were tying doctors' hands. It was clear that it would mean that if there had to be a choice between a woman's life and the life of the fertilised egg, the embryo, the fetus she was carrying, that sometimes women would end up dying. And it's awful. It was absolutely awful to discover that we were right. It was one of those things where really it would have been much better if we'd never been able to say, I told you so. And I was asked to speak here partly because I live in the north, and it's the exact same position in the north. We had the leading obstetrician gynaecologist in the north of Ireland, Professor Jim Dornan, telling the BBC yesterday that women in the north could die in exactly the same way as Savita has, because the law is so unclear that doctors don't know what's legal and what's not. So north and south of this island, it's time that the politicians got the finger out, that those who've been prevaricating, saying that they sort of support women's rights, but not actually bringing any legislation in. It's time that they stopped their vacillation. It's time that they stood up for women's rights, and it's time that they legislated to say when women's lives, when women's health can be protected by being able to access abortion on this island and not having to travel when we're sick, and as somebody else has said, not being able to travel at all if we're too poor to be able to find the money to go to England. So that's the first thing. They really, really, really have to legislate. The second question is, what kind of legislation? Again, most of the doctors that have spoken from across the world about this over the last week have said very clearly, there is no way that you can legislate to just save a woman's life, because the only way that you can be sure that a woman's life is, as they call it, at substantial risk, is if she dies. And we can't have that happening again. That's why we're here today, to say never again to that. So yes, we need legislation for X and C. Of course, we need that as emergency legislation now, but that is not enough. That is not enough to guarantee that no woman will ever die again. If we really want to be serious about respecting women's, not just their lives, but their health and their well-being, and our right to own our own bodies, then we have to say that we need legislation that will allow women to decide if and when they want to continue a pregnancy. We need a woman's right to choose, and we need that.